Well, good morning all, and welcome to our first webinar of 2020, and Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us. Our webinar today is all about the Community Choice Agency role in responding to electricity grid outages, planned and unplanned, and building system, electricity system reliability and resilience. My name is Woody Hastings. I'm the Energy Program Manager here at the Climate Center, and in the co-pilot seat and helping out on the questions and answers is Nina Turner. Nina is also the one you'd want to talk to if you ever want to submit a guest blog on our Clean Power Exchange e-news. You can email Nina at nina@theclimatecenter.org. Today we have two wonderful presenters, Geof Cyphers, the Chief Executive Officer of Sonoma Clean Power, California's second community choice agency. Geof has been the CEO there since the dawn of Sonoma Clean Power back in 2013, 2014. Also joining us today, Jan Pepper, the Chief Executive Officer of Peninsula Clean Energy, I think the fifth community choice agency, which covers San Mateo County. And so I will be introducing them later. First, a couple of housekeeping items for us. The webinar is being recorded, so you can review that afterwards if you miss anything. Everyone will be in listen-only mode. You can enter questions in your control panel at any time, and we do request that if you have any comments, lengthy comments, please, we're going to do a survey after the webinar. Put lengthy comments into that survey, and for your questions, if you could specify which presenter your question is directed to, or if it's to either or both, specify that. Thank you. And the question and answers will be in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the webinar. We have a couple handouts today, the slide decks for today's webinar, and the presenter bios. And before I hand it over to Geof and Jan, I just want to share some of the programs and initiatives that the Climate Center has underway. These are programs that aim to advance distributed energy resource deployment. As we see energy localization and DER deployment as the key to electricity system reliability and rapid decarbonization and achieving California's policy goals. In the upper left there, the Advanced Community Energy Initiative. It's our newest program that aims at providing community energy resilience planning to local governments, and there's a lot more to it than that, but you can find out about that. The program is led by one of our newest staff members, Kurt Johnson. Yes, you can find out about that on the resources page at cleanpowerexchange.org. In the fall, we introduced the DER Hub, a suite of resources particularly relevant to CCAs relating to DER deployment, and it includes a DER clearinghouse, which is a database of community choice agency DER projects and programs, so check that out. And the Climate Center is a team member along with Lancaster Choice Energy and Peninsula Clean Energy and our technical partner Terra Verde Energy on an NREL-funded project that is creating an online tool for designing virtual power plants. All of these are in our resources page on the Clean Power Exchange. And finally, we are also a team member in a California Energy Commission funded project with MCE as the lead partner in a building efficiency optimization strategy that will produce an online tool for designing optimized DER deployments on existing buildings. In addition to all those, the Center is also a party to several proceedings at the CPUC that focus on DERs and the future of the electricity system, and we track relevant legislation on these matters every legislative session. Information about all of the above is available at cleanpowerexchange.org. I think most of it is in the resources section, and that is a program of the Climate Center, which is theclimatecenter.org. For the Climate Center, it's all about rapid decarbonization. The Climate Center's Rapid Decarbonization campaign translates the urgent need for bold action and the groundswell of public support that we're seeing worldwide into speed and scale greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And the campaign is the vehicle for change that's commensurate with the scale of the crisis. And the goal of the campaign is to enact by 2025 in California the policies that are required by the science to be on track for a safe, stabilized climate by 2030. The Climate Center, perspective relative to the community choice role. The center has long seen community choice agencies as a unique opportunity to serve as a test bed for innovation, and we're seeing that happen in the real world as CCAs respond nimbly to challenges that come along like wildfires and PSPS. Given their super close relationship to local governments and their own communities, they are best suited to design programs that respond to community needs. And as lightly regulated local agencies, they are lean, mean fighting machines that can respond quickly. So we're seeing that happen. I would now like to turn things over to Geof Cyphers. And so Geof will take it away, Geof.
Thank you, Woody, and good morning, everyone. I think the only thing I'll take issue with your introduction is that we're lightly regulated. I think any CCA might laugh at the 60 or 70 filings we have to do every year. So I wanted to start by saying, as Cal CCA chair, I've been talking to a lot of CCAs around California, and we are all dealing with public safety power shutoffs and the lack of a reliable, safe grid. And how we're doing that is evolving very quickly. So I think everything you're going to hear today, from me at least, is a very fast evolving thing where literally every week we're identifying new ways we can help customers or coordinate with county health or the fire departments or take other actions that are really in the service of helping minimize the scale of events of shutoffs, minimizing the duration, and minimizing the harm. And that's kind of the framework I use to think about it. And so, Woody, I guess if I just say next, you'll go to the next slide, or Nina. Thanks. So I think first, I just want to start by saying, with 6,000 homes lost just in our service territory over the last few years, we know as a public why these events are happening, and the public reaction is, considering the scale and the frequency of these shutoffs in our area, it's been relatively positive because people do not want to lose another 6,000 homes and see so many deaths and injuries. And so next slide. The way I like to approach this and what we've begun doing is saying, what is the local need that will remain for, say, power generation after the necessary and urgent repairs to particularly the distribution grid, but even the higher voltage grid, are performed? And so one of the roles that Sonoma Clean Power has jumped into about a year ago was to begin advocating for the fastest methods of having a clean power way of keeping the lights on. And so we've downloaded all the circuit maps from PG&E's website, and the CPC has some of this as well. We've identified where new switches can be added, and the thing about that is that many distribution circuits only have a portion that is in a high fire threat area. But the way PG&E's grid is set up today, it's a radial grid, meaning there's a substation that gets a connection from high voltage, and then out from that substation comes essentially branches of distribution circuits, and they don't reconnect. They don't actually form a circle. They go out and then stop. There's an end. And oftentimes it's at those ends that the circuits go over hills and become, relatively high fire threat. And so there's a way of isolating those segments and minimizing the amount of customers that need to be shut off pretty dramatically. And I'll give you an example of that. There's also possibilities, certainly in our area and in the foothills and potentially along the peninsula, I'm not sure, where some of the substations themselves are in high fire threat areas. And in those cases, there's a way to look at adjacent substations nearby and see if a reconductoring, an installation by PG&E of new power poles to connect a city or a large area with a different substation, if there's enough capacity, that can be another way to keep the lights on. And so, and of course, we don't physically do any of this work. What we do is we talk with customers and we ask them to bring these kinds of ideas to PG&E and the CPUC, and then we help advocate at the PUC to get projects prioritized. And so a lot of the principle there is in that last bullet, that getting a cost for fixing the grid back to essentially a safe grid that can stay up through an event is your number to beat, essentially, for a local microgrid solution in terms of both cost and a reliability standard, because you may still have to shut off circuits occasionally to make it work. So next slide. So here's a really specific example from northeast area of Santa Rosa of the kind of analysis we do. There's a substation, which is the orange dot in the upper left of the map, and it serves a pretty large city area. And then there is this branch that snakes up into the green area, which is the rural area. And that hill essentially goes over a hill into the kind of Calistoga area where there's a lot of high fire threat. And so we found a place where you could add a switch, which is about a $100,000 project or less. And with one switch, almost all the customers could be kept on through a high fire threat area. And so I've put a link down here. So I think these are downloadable slides don't back up one second. At the bottom left of this slide is a link where you can go to PG&E's website and download all the circuit data in their territory and get information about all the publicly available information that you don't have to be a load serving entity or a CCA or a utility to have access to. So you may want to poke around there if you're interested. Okay, now next slide. So the second task, so the first task was minimizing the need, right? And for local resources, or minimizing the cost, I should say as well. The second is figuring out, what's the strategy? How are we going to fulfill the remaining need? And so a lot of the work we've been doing just in the last few months has been convening local governments, local cities that are affected by this, local agencies, and saying, how do we create a really well-crafted plan to support the public through PSPS events or avoiding them altogether? What kinds of resources do we want to use? And what's the preference order? So I don't know how many folks have heard, but PG&E is running a microgrid request for offers for power sources. And nearly all of their responses so far has been for natural gas-fired power generation. And one of the problems with that is they didn't have any sort of priority of resource types. And so we're pushing back on that process and saying natural gas needs to be considered the last of the available types of power generation to keep circuits on. And really everything else in terms of clean power solutions, in terms of minimizing the need, needs to be considered first. And so one of the examples that could have changed and we hope we can still affect PG&E's solicitation would be to say, instead of having to fit a generator onto the footprint of existing substations that they own, let's broaden the solution and allow folks to propose solar with batteries and other types of solutions on land that governments own, that customers own, with resources that governments and CCAs and customers own, and allow an aggregation of those solutions of 2 or 3 or 5 or 500 solutions to fulfill the backup power need in a power shutoff, so that the substation can be essentially kept live while the transmission goes down. So there are some cases in our area where some transmission lines may take a very long time to repair, or they may decide it's not economic to ever repair. And in that case, you really do need a power source near a substation, but we're advocating that it could be off the land of the substation. There's also a big dialogue right now about whether or not biomethane should be considered a renewable resource as part of the solicitation. And because what that would allow is injecting a biologic source of gas into a pipeline in Texas and offsetting essentially the natural gas use here in California. I'm personally a bit suspicious of that model, being a skeptic of offsets. And so I'm certainly looking at trying to prioritize that well below other possible solutions. And so next slide. So then the third thing that we're doing, and a lot of CCAs are, is coming up with programs that directly help customers. And so we've, working a lot in figuring out what kind of messages people need to hear. What's the difference between simple backup power systems and microgrids and islanding? There's a lot of basic information that needs to get out. We are working on creating programs that streamline access to batteries, that collect all the different incentives through the SGIP program and elsewhere, and reach out to the customers that have effectively free batteries. So if you are medically sensitive and live in a high fire threat area, according to some standards, you effectively can get free backup power in the form of batteries to add to a solar array that you have. And so, but people need to know that. And so there's a lot of effort that we're gearing up to do for outreach. We are doing some technical support, not a lot yet, but we are working on one microgrid in a large retirement community, and working with EPRI and the CPUC and PG&E, all in a 4-way partnership. We have begun doing some contractor training, but that's something we're looking to expand pretty significantly in the later half of this year. And then we're continuing to do a lot of research into demand response as a dispatchable resource. And I suspect most people on this call know a few basics about demand response, but one of the real potentials, in my view, is being able to collect many thousands of resources that customers have behind the meter and dispatch it in an organized way to reduce or even eliminate the need for some additional sources of power. And that is not a complete solution for a PSPS event, but it can be a partial solution. So it can prioritize loads during a power shutoff event and allow low priority loads those customers to be paid in exchange for not having power to some of their resources. And so that could be industrial, could even be, maybe you don't have access to car charging when the sun isn't shining during a PSPS event. So maybe you have to charge your car in the middle of the day because there's a lot of solar, but not a lot of other resources. That's an example of a DR program that could be facilitated. Next slide. So we have 2 big initiatives, and so our Advanced Energy Center is a building we're constructing in Santa Rosa. And the idea of that is that it's really kind of the physical space where we can showcase and talk about and deliver all of our customer programs of any kind. But relevant to the power shutoffs, there'll be training there for contractors around, learning about how to retrofit existing solar arrays to include switches and batteries, There'll be information about, how to work with customers that are medically sensitive and what options they have access to through our county programs. There will be the ability to purchase equipment there for addressing power shutoffs. In addition to that, the center's additional mission is to help homeowners and home builders make the transition to completely zero carbon homes. And so every technology you might need to do that is available for sale there. And we essentially match up customers to contractors, provide zero interest financing, and then they repay those costs through their electric bill. That program goes live this summer. So the building's still in construction. And so unfortunately, we won't be able to hit early enough to be that effective for the next fire season, but we are getting it up as fast as we can. So next slide. Thanks. So my last slide is just to talk about a program we've been running since the 2017 fires. Early in 2018, we stood up a program and recruited PG&E to join us to offer significant cash incentives to folks rebuilding burned homes to a very high energy standard. And at the top end of the scale, these are homes that are, extremely energy efficient, way beyond code. They run on renewable energy 24 hours a day, so they have solar with batteries, or they've pre-purchased our 24-hour renewable product for 20 years, about the same life as a solar array is warranted. And what we've found is that since the power shutoffs have become more common and large scale, this program has increased in its popularity as people are rebuilding, but they're also choosing that higher standard to allow their homes to island during a shutoff. In fact, some of the homes have even already been able to operate in that mode during the last shutoff. So that was really gratifying that people have already been able to use that. And what was also exciting about this is the success of this program has been deep enough that it was copied. And so it's being delivered by PG&E by itself in Butte County and by Edison down in Malibu. And the CPUC is considering expanding this more generally around the state of California. So something I think CCAs are generally good at is piloting things very fast and trying things that might not work and that don't need to meet the same cost effectiveness tests that CPUC applies, and then exporting the lessons when the lessons are proven. So I think with that, I'll turn it back to you, Woody.
Well, thank you very much, Geoff. And I think what the sort of final comments you made are a good segue to me wanting to just respond to what you said shortly before you kicked off there, which was challenging the notion that CCAs are lightly regulated. And point taken. I mean, I agree. I think the point I was trying to make is that CCAs are differently regulated in two key areas where they are not under the thumb of the CPUC, strictly speaking. It is the ability to set their own rates and develop their own rate structures, which they haven't done much of yet. But also significantly, in regard to what you were just talking about, is the ability to roll out, design and roll out programs, on a relatively rapid wink of an eye, really, compared to what it takes for a big IOU program to go through the process and get the stamp of approval from the CPUC. The CCAs can be, far more, responsive in a far shorter time frame on some of these things. So would you agree with that?
Sure, of course.
Good. Okay. With that, I would like to hand things off to Jan Pepper, CEO of Peninsula Clean Energy. So yeah, Jan, just let me know when you're ready to advance to your each slide, please.
Okay. And thank you, Woody, for inviting Peninsula Clean Energy to participate today. And thank you to everyone on the line for taking time out of your day to hear what we have going on. So we can go to the first slide, or the next slide, please. So just a little background on who we are. We are the CCA serving San Mateo County. Our mission is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the county. And we have two electricity options that our customers use. Our Eco Plus is the one that everyone was defaulted into when we enrolled our customers in 2016 and 2017. Currently, that product is 50% renewable, 95% greenhouse gas free. And from the outset, we have priced that at 5% lower than PG&E, which saves our customers, our residents and businesses, about $18 million a year. We also have an opt-up choice, which is our 100% renewable product. And for a residential customer, this would be a premium of about $4 more per month. So we can go to the next slide. So our focus today is on the resiliency plans that we have in place at Peninsula Clean Energy, and to tell you what we're doing. So we experienced our first public safety power shutoff event last October, and after that happened, the PCE staff presented a plan to our board of directors, which consists of a council member from each of our 20 cities, plus the 2 county supervisors, to commit up to $10 million over 3 years to develop programs to address these problems regarding resiliency when there's a PSPS event or any other type of natural disaster. So we are finishing up that strategy, and we will be presenting that to the board next week for their approval. And then back in November, we, along with a few other CCAs and some municipal utilities down here in the South Bay, issued an RFP to procure 10 megawatts of distributed resource adequacy capacity. So basically, projects with energy storage that can qualify for capacity under the programs run by the California Independent System Operator and the Public Utility Commission to qualify as resource adequacy. And so that program is actually kind of a subset of the overall resiliency strategy that we're looking for board approval on next month or next week. So if we go to the next slide, this shows the impact of the PSPS in San Mateo County, and this affected a lot of our customers for the last PSPS event that was on October 26th to 28th. So if you look at this map, San Mateo County runs from basically right under San Francisco down to Santa Clara County, and we're surrounded by the ocean on one side and the bay on the other side. And as you can see by the shaded in area, that all of that yellow area was affected by the public power shutoff. So most of our customers along the coast, and then a lot of our customers in the urban areas of the county. If we go to the next slide, this shows the high fire threat districts, and these are areas that where the tier 2 and the tier 3 are the areas where there's a chance of high fire, and so a lot of our rural areas, the coastline up to kind of the top of the mountains are in those areas. And then if we go to the next slide, you know, there's risks of wildfires and those things, but of course there's also earthquake risks. So putting these programs together will be helpful for our customers, not only for the power shutoffs, but when the big one hits, and who knows when that's going to be, we want to be able to have resiliency and have our customers have electricity and be able to be safe during that time. And then when we look at the next slide, we're also looking at sea level rise in this area. And as we have the ocean on one side, and then we have the bay on the other, and all those blue areas along the bay in different scenarios are going to be affected by sea level rise. So when we look at where we might locate projects, we maybe want to avoid a place where sea level rise is going to affect it, or make sure that there are plans in place to protect those areas of our service territory where sea level rise may be a problem. So if we go to the next slide. So we have a few objectives for our resiliency programs. And the way we're approaching it is, what can we do right now to address the needs of our most medically threatened customers? So we have customers who are on medical baseline or who have other health issues that rely on electricity to stay alive. You know, they're either in a single family home and they have a ventilator or whatever, or an electric powered wheelchair, or lots of different things that rely on electricity. And if the electricity is off, it's going to be life threatening to them. There's also senior facilities or critical care facilities where people are, and again, need to have electricity so that the people who are there are safe. And then we have a goal at Peninsula Clean Energy to be 100% renewable on a time coincident basis by 2025. Namely, we're planning to be 100% renewable and matching our supply to our load on an hour-by-hour basis every day of the year, so that we're completely renewable, that we're not relying on fossil-based resources or natural gas generators that are on the grid to power our needs here, with the hope that if we can demonstrate that that can be done here, that will serve as a model for others to move to 100% renewable and help us to accelerate our goals to be completely clean. So, for example, the PG&E RFO that Geof referred to about building new natural gas projects goes against those priorities that we have, and it also isn't really in keeping with the state's goals to be more renewable and by 2045 to be 100% clean. So we're looking for solutions that are based on renewable energy and storage. We want to establish a platform for long-term energy resiliency business models. We need to have a business model that's sustainable, that makes sense economically. And then just overall, in the way we think about energy as we go forward, we want to just build resiliency into all of the things that we're doing and have that always be top of mind. So the next slide shows the strategy that we're moving forward. And our slides are not as pretty as Geof's, and we'll work on that in the future to make them prettier. But this is what we're doing. So we've broken it into kind of 4 areas. The first is the medically fragile that I talked about first of all, and that's the resiliency for medically fragile customers, and then also our distributed RA program, which I'll talk about in a minute. The second area that we're looking at is community response centers, and these might be community centers or schools or police stations or fire stations, places where people can go to be safe, to be able to charge up their phones if they need to, and be able to continue being connected if there's a natural disaster or a power shutoff. And then there's critical infrastructure. So again, police, fire stations, water pumping, sewage treatment plants, things that you want to make sure are continuing to operate if the power is off, hospitals, things like that. And then there's a lot of future programs that we're looking at, and looking at different types of innovations. Can we use EVs as backup power? Can we use electric buses for backup power, because our county transit agency is moving to electric buses? What can we do for multi-unit dwellings? That's what a MUD is. Can we retrofit existing solar projects and add storage to those? How can we do microgrids? So some of the things that Geof talked about, we're also looking at as well. And we go to the next slide, thank you. Under program descriptions, this gives a little more detail into what we're looking at here. So one of the programs with medically fragile customers is to have partnerships with hospitals to identify customers with medical needs. And when you look at where someone might be in the hospital and they're leaving the hospital, they need to have certain equipment as they go home, but they may be in a hospital in San Mateo County, but they don't live here. They may live in the East Bay, or similarly, they may be in a children's hospital in Oakland and then be coming back over to this side of the bay. So coordinating with other CCAs to identify these customers and make sure that we're communicating and helping all of them out. And a lot of this is definitely about partnerships. And being a CCA that's serving San Mateo County, we have the ability to work closely with other agencies within the county that work with these different communities. For example, the county health department has a number of programs going on, and they have a good idea of where the facilities are or where the customers are that we should be reaching out to make sure that they're aware of these programs, and partnering with them to do that outreach and make sure the message gets out there and finding those customers that we can help. The community resilience centers, we are currently doing a project jointly with East Bay Community Energy, where we received a grant from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District to identify in San Mateo County and for EBCE in Alameda County specific facilities throughout our territory that could be a good place to deploy clean backup power for resilience. So we have reached out to all of our 20 cities in the county, and they have identified within their cities which are the facilities that make sense to look at for a resilient facility, and we're moving forward. Now that we've identified those, we're doing the financial analysis of what could we put in there, and then we'll be following that up with an RFO or an RFP to actually get some installations installed. And then on the critical infrastructure, I kind of talked about that a little bit before. And then we'll talk about the distributed RA program, which is doing microgrids for residential and commercial customers and procuring RA. So there's a lot more detail about our programs, and we have a substantial strategy document that we'll be posting on the web hopefully tomorrow in anticipation of next Thursday's board meeting that provides a lot of detail about what we're going to be doing. So if we go to the next slide, the Distributed Resource RFP, this is a joint procurement that we're doing with East Bay Community Energy, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, City of Palo Alto Utilities, and Silicon Valley Power in Santa Clara to offer, to provide RA capacity through distributed energy resources. And the target for all of these, all 5 of our communities, our LSCs, was a 33 megawatt program and a carve out also for disadvantaged communities. So if we go to the next slide here, this gives a little bit more detail about it. And basically it's to install solar plus storage at certain customer residential locations and commercial locations, to have a portion of that be for disadvantaged communities. In our case, we specified that 5% of the installations need to be serving disadvantaged communities, and make sure that this will help all of our more of our customers. So we had the solicitation. We received offers in December. We received 19 different offers for 60 megawatts. We're looking only for 10 megawatts. So we may expand what we do under this program, and we should have a decision in April about which projects we're going to move forward with and install these facilities. So that's it for me, and happy to turn it back over for questions.
Well, great. Thank you very much, Jan. Excellent presentation. And so it is now time for our Q&A period. And hopefully folks have been typing questions in. And so, Nina, do we have Do we have some questions for Jan or Geoff?
I have a question, actually. So during this last PSPS event, we saw an uptick of people buying gas-powered generators for their homes, which generally will just add more pollution, and in one case started another fire on someone's property. Do the CCAs have any kind of measures to discourage people from buying gas-powered generators, or will there be any talk of maybe buying them back from people once there are more established microgrids, just to avoid any further pollution or fires?
Yeah, definitely. And oh, go ahead, Jan. You start.
I'm sure our answers are probably pretty much the same. We don't have that's a great idea to have a program to buy those back, but that's exactly why we're putting these programs out there, because when people buy diesel generators and put those out there, natural gas generators, it goes against what we're trying to accomplish, which is to get off of fossil fuels.
And I just add, we felt that we had to stand up a really easy to use alternative program before we had the legitimacy to tell people not to go out and do this. And so that's our priority, or the order of events is we're working on, streamlining, making it super easy to work with batteries and solar and other alternatives. And then I think we're going to work on, at the state level, we're hoping to come up with a buyback type of program.
Great. So this one isn't directed toward anyone in particular, but can either of you tell us more about the grants PG&E is reported to be doling out for communities to develop microgrids?
So I have, go ahead.
You go ahead this time.
Okay. My understanding of what's happening around microgrids that has some significant dollars associated with it is two things. One is what I mentioned in my main presentation first, which is PG&E owned generation, or they're proposing at least at substations. The other is these community resilience centers in actually not in, but right near high fire threat areas. And that's a pretty limited program. I don't remember the number, but it's kind of, I think in the low 20s or something of resiliency centers that they have some funding for. And also not a giant dollar amount. So that program is they're also moving ahead with those sites a little more slowly than we were expecting. So we have a few in Sonoma County, none in Mendocino to my knowledge, and relatively small dollar amount. So the big dollar amount, the kind of multi-billion-dollar program, is for their owned generation at substations, which hopefully we can steer that money into something more effective.
Yeah. Ditto.
Okay, this next question, again, not specified for anyone. Is the CCA industry coordinating with the Title 24 mandates?
You're talking about solar, I assume?
I assume so, yeah.
You want to jump in, Jan?
I can talk about that a little bit, yeah. And I think maybe what they're talking about is the new building codes that came out for 2019. So we've been doing a big program here at PCE, and actually doing it with Silicon Valley Clean Energy and San Jose Clean Energy for both San Mateo and Santa Clara counties, to work with our cities and other jurisdictions to go beyond what the new building codes are, and we're calling those REACH codes, to try to encourage people to install all electric for new construction, and to install the infrastructure for EV charging for new construction, and to try to discourage putting in natural gas. So if someone wants to do a dual fueled system with both electricity and natural gas, that there would be a higher bar that they needed to reach as far as the efficiency of the home, so that they would be more inclined to go all electric. And in fact, some of our communities, Menlo Park is one who actually passed an ordinance to have it be all electric for new construction. This is for new residential construction and low-rise commercial. And we're slowly working through all of the cities in our county to try to help them go ahead and adopt these REACH codes.
And I'd add a couple things. One is that obviously mandating solar on the rooftops of all new homes is an excellent idea when you can functionally use the energy. And so we are desperately pushing the CPUC to even accelerate their changes in rates to reflect the time of use periods that will make it very cheap to use middle of the day power, because the wholesale cost of energy in the middle of the day is extremely low. In some seasons, it's 0 or below, but rates don't really reflect that as significantly yet. And when you give people that price signal of very expensive evening energy and very cheap midday energy, people will help solve that problem with daytime EV charging, et cetera. And the other point is Commissioner McAllister at the Energy Commission is very open right now to considering in the next code update for Title 24 a change that might allow all types of renewable energy to meet this standard. And I think that's important because expanding this solar mandate to allow other forms of renewable energy will help us solve the time of day problem that I'm so impressed that Peninsula is committed to time coincident renewable 100% by 2025. For those who maybe don't work in power generation and matching, that is an extremely aggressive goal. So I applaud you, Jan, for that. But I think we may need to work together as a coalition to get Title 24 to allow more types of renewables into the system and battery systems and so forth.
Okay, this next question also isn't specified who it's for, but either of you can answer it, I think. Have you considered having new all-electric REACH codes also wired to be ready for community microgrids?
Jan mentioned a couple of her jurisdictions. We have 2 of ours who've adopted REACH codes, the town of Windsor and the city of Santa Rosa. There are some developer lawsuits that are challenging that on the basis of CEQA, but it's looking positive that the Energy Commission is certifying those plans for Berkeley and Marin and other areas that came a little bit earlier than us. So it's looking somewhat promising that those REACH codes will stand up, and that's encouraging. One just thought for the kind of long-term vision would be if people in cities that have natural gas service to their house all agreed to stop having natural gas service, then you have an in-place conduit for running gigabit fiber to every home that's there now. You just can't run gas through it while you're running fiber through it. And that idea was first advanced in Hawaii, and I think that's a real interesting vision, I think, for people to start exploring. Is it's so expensive to run, conduit in streets. Why not use the conduit that's already there?
That's a great idea. And I think part of the question was also asking about microgrids. I guess, and that's certainly part of the concern, is that if you put in all electric, what happens when the power gets shut off? And we're certainly looking at microgrids and trying to figure out if, just like Geof has been doing, they're way ahead of us in looking at the PG&E infrastructure, and can certain lines be moved from one substation to another. We're just in the process of looking at that as well here, and seeing if we can isolate certain neighborhoods in such a way that if the power got shut off and we had a microgrid there, that area could still have their power.
Okay, this next question. Do you expect to partner with PG&E in the development of DER resources? How do you expect to get participation with them for these programs?
This is Woody. Question. I'm pretty sure the question is directed to Geof. Well, it could be to both, and it's not DER. It's demand response resource there.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think that there's a lot of potential here, in part because really nowhere in the U.S. has a very large-scale, very valuable demand response market been created. PJM in the eastern part of the U.S. has a reasonably functional demand response market where if you're willing to allow a device to be automatically controlled on and off or up and down, then you get essentially paid for that service by the grid operators. We do have programs like that in California, but they're incredibly low value right now. And so the ultimate, there's a whole bunch of kinds of markets at the transmission level. And customers can participate in them because what they do has an effect on the transmission grid. The markets that are administered by PG&E actually have had no participation by anybody in the last couple of years because they were worth so little money and had some risk. And so what we're doing right now is proceeding and creating our own market. And what I mean is we have 200,000 plus accounts of customers using electricity across two large counties. And each of those has different kinds of needs. So there's people in one part of our territory that need power at one time of day, but they need it on quickly, and other parts of our territory have different needs. And we can internalize and create a demand response market without any participation by PG&E or the grid operators at the transmission level, and capture somewhere around 60% of all of the value. The stuff we don't capture is like avoided fatigue on equipment that PG&E owns, which we'd like to work our way in at some point because that does increase the value. But my argument to CCAs is get started without having to wait, because getting the PUC, because ultimately if you're partnering with PG&E, you're also partnering with the PUC. Getting them to work in a free market modality is challenging because they are culturally suspicious of markets. And so it could take us a very long time, I think, to have a distribution level market for a demand response program that's administered by a utility that pays very much or that is valuable.
Jan, did you want to respond to that one about partnering with PG&E on demand response?
I mean, I think I would. We haven't put together such a program like Geof is talking about, but we're certainly thinking about it. But it is a challenge to work with PG&E because they have a focus right now on getting their grid safe, and the inability of CCAs to be able to capture that additional value stream that comes with helping them to delay upgrading a certain piece of equipment, or helping to provide additional support for their system doesn't exist yet. So I applaud Geof for just going for it.
We're not very patient.
We aren't either. So we look at different things, and it's one of the great things about the CCA movement is that we're all looking at different things and we all learn from each other. So I'll probably call Geof after this webinar and say, "Hey, Geof, I really like this one thing you were talking about. We'd like to do that here," and we all share ideas, and it's
that
really
is
great.
Kind of one of the special things. I wholeheartedly agree. Is that when we were trying to figure out how to schedule a demand response program into the markets most effectively, we were describing what we were doing to some of the people at Silicon Valley and Peninsula and saying, "Can you guys help us figure this out?" and sort of challenging them to like improve on what we're doing. And it's all open source. I mean, everything we do is open source. And so crowdsourcing solutions might be another headline for CCA value, in my opinion.
Okay, well, we have time for maybe one more question. Nina, did you have one queued up?
The question I have after that is, are the CCAs participating in the ISO BTM program to offset the curtailment duck curve?
So we participate in proxy demand response, for those who are familiar with the market titles, and we're working toward participating in non-generating resource markets. But our ultimate goal is to get full resource adequacy value for all our behind-the-meter resources under dispatch. And if anybody wants to read more about it, they can get on our website and look up Grid Savvy. That's the name of our program.
And for anyone who maybe doesn't have the unpacking of what that question had in it, it's that was the independent system operator behind the meter market. Okay, well, I think we are close enough to time that I should thank our presenters. Thank you very much, Geof and Jan. Do you have any? We have maybe a minute for any closing comments, if you'd like. And if not,
I'm just grateful to have been invited here, and for the Climate Center for hosting these. I think these are really helpful. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, same here. Thank you for bringing people together to talk about this and to put questions out there, because this is kind of top of mind right now. We're okay right now because it's raining today, so don't expect any wildfires. But when we, next summer and next fall, we want to be ready with solutions to help our customers, and that's what we're all striving to do.
Yes, well, but there could also be floods with the rain, but that's another story. Okay, well.
Yeah, you're right.
Always looking on the bright side, Woody.
Yeah, there I am. All right, thanks very much. So to close out, folks, we just have a couple of dates and reminders of things coming up. But first of all, the webinar recording will be posted at Clean Power Exchange. There's the URL. And again, the two handouts, these slides are in the handouts. You can click on that and download it. We have the InfoCast Community Choice Summit coming up next week. I will be moderating a panel on challenges to CCAs of deploying DERs on the 22nd in the morning. So if you haven't already gotten your tickets, get your tickets for that in Sacramento. The next Lean Energy US Market webinar is on February 14th. Those are always at 10 a.m. and fantastic information-packed sessions. The next Climate Center webinar will be on March 18th, and feel free to chime in with your suggestions on what we should be talking about. You can email me at woody@theclimatecenter.org or to Nina and pitch in your suggestions. I'm also happy to announce that the Climate Center will be hosting an Advanced Community Energy conference on May 18th at Sac State. And so more information will be forthcoming on the Climate Center website and out in cyberspace. So thank you all for joining us. And with that, I will once again thank our presenters. Thank you, Nina, and thank you all for joining us. Appreciate your participation and interest. Have a great day.